Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So, today we are going to talk about the Voting Rights Act. We are going to talk about the decision that was reached, what happens as it moves forward, what the expected developments are, what this decision changes, and what the fixes are for it if it moves forward and the experts aren't right on what happens. Okay, so if you missed the news, a decision was reached regarding Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. A panel of judges in the Federal Appeals Court decided that there is no private right of action in Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. What does that mean? It means that basically only DOJ can bring a case under Section 2. Historically, those cases are brought by citizens. They're brought by individuals, or they are brought by groups of citizens or organizations. It's normally not DOJ. For those who are familiar with this, yes, this decision does not exactly align with decades of precedent. Now, most experts will tell you that this is headed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is going to overturn this decision. Under normal circumstances, I would agree. If we had a normal Supreme Court, I would like to remind everybody that we don't have a normal Supreme Court, and I would not stand here today and say, yeah, that's what's going to happen, because it may not. So we have to figure out what the fixes are if the Supreme Court goes the other way and lets this stand. There are two real options. The first is the legislative fix. Okay, in a normal political climate, it would probably be pretty easy to get Congress to say, okay, well, let's just amend this. Poof, there's a private right of action here now. Everything goes back to the way it was. That's in a normal political climate. Getting Republicans to support voting rights right now is about like asking Russia to provide military aid to Ukraine. It's not going to happen. So that seems unlikely. The other option for a fix is one of those moments where the people who brought this about, well, be careful what you wish for. Because if DOJ is the only entity that can bring a case like this forward, they have an obligation to do it, which means there needs to be an office, which means the Department of Justice will become even more involved when it comes to, I don't know, redistricting and stuff like that. Those people who wanted less interference and wanted to be able to kind of do whatever they wanted, when it comes to voting rights. Basically, the politicians wanted to pick their voters rather than the voters pick the politicians. They should probably get ready for a lot more federal interference, because that's probably how this would play out in the long term. Now, regardless of what happens in the future, currently, this stands in Arkansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota. If you are in that area, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is basically only for the Attorney General. It's kind of how it works. There is a decent chance that the Supreme Court overturns this, but we don't know that. So we have to be ready for the alternative, which is the Supreme Court upholds it, and from there has to be a fix. There isn't a lot of legislation like this that you look at and you're like, hey, this is objectively good. The Voting Rights Act is kind of one of those. It protects the small amount of voice that Americans have. And they've gone out of their way to take a section of it and say, well, it applies to you, but you can't actually do anything with it. You need to get one of your betters to bring that case for you. It's more of the same typical stuff. This will probably turn into a big thing. This will be something that gets talked about. It'll become maybe a topic of legislation, stuff like that. This isn't going away. So it might be something you want to dig into if you want to have a little bit more context on it. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.